Welcome to Kathy on the Couch, your podcast for everyday clinicians who sit with grief, trauma, and the hardest human experiences every day. You weren't meant to carry this alone, and this is a space for therapists who hold space for others and sometimes need a place to be held too. I am Kathy, and I am your EMDR consultant, trainer, and thanatologist, specializing in methods of death, dying, and bereavement. I created this podcast to support those who do the deep work, especially trauma and grief therapists and EMDR clinicians needing a soft place to land, who want real conversations, meaningful support, and a community where the hard questions are finally welcome. We also are thrilled to share and announce Kathy on the Couch membership community, which is your home for grief and trauma consultation, professional growth. It's by therapists, for therapists, where you find a monthly consultation group. You'll find a monthly NBCC CE training. You'll get access to a course module and resource kits. We're so happy to have you in one place, and you don't have to go looking for all those items in all the places. You can just come here. That's our mission, where we talk honestly about all clinical challenges in the business of being a healer through curriculum development and training and breaking the silence to lead and thrive in the field without losing ourselves in the process. So if you're looking to join for deeper connection, I invite you to join our membership community to help you learn and grow. Or if you're an EMDR therapist looking to be certified or a consultant, we have our program, EMDR University. Now let's get comfortable and let's head on over to the couch. I have an amazing guest today, Torie Wiksell. She does so many things, but the best thing that I've recently come across is her community, the Confident Boundaries community, and her podcast, You're Not Crazy podcast. And she is just an amazing person. She's created this whole structure in Torie, about a year.
What a whirlwind, right?
Yeah. And she kind of is helping me as I'm using the platform called Kajabi. She's kind of helping me learn how to see everything that it can do and building our own membership community. It's just been really fun. And you're also on the West Coast. I'm on the West Coast too. So we're just going to do a quick bio. Today, we are just going to dive into everything about her community, what it's been like to build it, and also launch her podcast. So do you want to start by telling us a little bit about your background and clinical experience before you launched all of this?
So thank you so much for having me, Kathy. It's so fun and exciting.
Yeah.
I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist.
Oh, okay.
So that's my background, which probably is not surprising given that I work with dysfunctional family systems.
Okay. I'm a life social worker, so that kind of set you up for success here.
It's definitely a different framework. And it's so interesting what leads us to like our different graduate study programs too. But
Yes, ma'am.
I think my background definitely influenced me drifting towards the marriage and family therapy route. I started my career about 13 years ago. I started working in an inpatient mental health hospital. I did my practicum there, and then I stayed on there for about a year and a half after. There, I got a lot of great experience working with a lot of different types of clients and a lot of different mental health disorders.
Was that adults?
It was adults, yeah. So we had full range. So we had a behavioral health unit, and then we also had a forensic unit. So I worked on all units. So I worked, and that was the first exposure that I got to working with clients with personality disorders too, because in the hospital, access to working with a lot of different clients from a lot of different, and after that, I bridged into community mental health. In community mental health, I did a lot of crisis work. I worked with acute mental illness, severe mental illness. Again, I've done a lot of work with clients who are struggling with bipolar disorder, major depressive disorder, schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder. Also, a lot of exposure to working with clients with personality disorders. Throughout that time, I did additional DBT training. I really enjoyed it.
Did you do any of those certifications for DBT?
No, I've never done like a DBT. Yes. And with a lot of those certifications, you have to go in it with your team, right? So I was lucky enough when I worked in community mental health that one of our trainers for our big like umbrella program had trained under Marsha Linehan.
Oh,
that was really cool. DBT really spoke to me. I think later on I learned because there's so many components when you grow up in a dysfunctional family of just being an emotionally healthy adult that aren't modeled to you. With DBT, things really started to click in my own brain professionally, clinically, and personally, where I was like, oh my gosh, these are things that I've never thought of before. I've never seen adults handle situations like this before with these skills. As I went along in my career, I kind of drifted towards working with a lot of clients in crises. It was something that I had a lot of training in. It was something I enjoyed. I continued to work with clients with BPD up until I opened my therapy private practice in 2018. The first couple of years of my therapy practice, I still saw clients who had borderline personality disorder. And it wasn't until in the early pandemic that I started transitioning away from working directly with clients with BPD to working with their family members and partners. The way that came to be is kind of interesting. I had this background working with clients with personality disorders, which I know in our field is not something that a lot of therapists like.
Yeah,
right? Like not.
And well, so I love you. Yes.
I really loved it. And it was so cool to just see progress that could be made, and how hard they worked and everything. And so in the beginning of the pandemic, I actually had therapist friends, colleagues of mine who knew that I did this work, who knew that I had this background, and they had clients in their private practice who sounded like they had a parent with either narcissistic personality disorder or BPD, or a partner with narcissistic personality disorder and BPD. And they didn't know how to support that client adequately. And they didn't know who else had like this experience with it. And so I would start getting referrals from my therapist friends to work with these clients. And I loved it. Like it was my favorite thing ever. Transitioned away from working with clients with BPD and really focusing on supporting adults who have a parent with BPD or narcissistic personality disorder. And that has been my private practice for probably about the last 5+ years.
When did the narcissism come in?
So throughout my career, you get exposure when you're working in acute with severe mental illness, when you're working in crisis response, when you're working in inpatient hospitals, you get exposure to working with clients with narcissistic personality disorder. And when I was working on my licensure, I had a lot of training and education and supervision around it. And it's an interesting thing because we know clients with true narcissistic personality disorder don't do the work, right? There's no buy-in. So it's not like you are trained to help a client with narcissistic personality disorder not have narcissistic personality disorder or manage that. But when you have so much exposure to clients like this, and when you have the clinical supervision to kind of navigate what that actually looks like in practice, you do learn how to work with like family dynamics, like in family therapy sessions. A lot of it is really solution focused. A lot of it is really being able to identify narcissism and narcissistic personality disorder for what it is, to understand the insidious abuse that is happening there, and to work on radical acceptance, setting realistic boundaries, what is actually possible, what is happening. And so I ended up doing family therapy with several clients who throughout the years, short term, right, in like these more crisis acute settings. But still, again, not something a lot of people have experience with throughout their clinical career. About 2 years ago, my practice was full and I was getting referrals. I was getting emails from people that were out of the states. I'm licensed up and down the West Coast, but for states out of my licensure. And I was getting people reaching out to me saying like, this is a really specific niche. I'm pretty sure my parent has BPD, or my parent's been diagnosed with BPD. No one really understands it. I can add you to my wait list, but I tend to work with clients long term, so those spots don't open up a ton. I have to figure out, there like has to be a way to get more education out there, right? Like I have to be able to figure out a way that I can actually support people that want this support and are dealing with such a specific thing. I always say like my niche is like the most specific, smallest niche in the world, but we're like a very specific group of people with very specific family problems.
Yes.
A lot of the times they were already working with a therapist. They needed to get feedback on their specific family situation, boundaries that they were trying to set. They wanted clarity. And so it was really solution focused, action oriented, like short term type of consulting work. And then in July of that year, I started the You're Not Crazy podcast. And
Is
I was
this
like, why not?
2024?
I was like, well, why not? We'll try. No one will listen. I'll put it out there. And that was actually the thing that changed everything. The You're Not Crazy podcast was the thing I didn't think anyone would listen to. And it's been a complete game changer. I mean, I get messages and emails almost every day from people that are finding the podcast that say, oh my God, I've never heard anyone explain it in a way that feels so true to what I've lived, like what I've been through. And I think the reality is on the You're Not Crazy podcast, I talk not just clinically about my perspective and my approach and all of these things, but I also talk about my personal story of growing up with a mom who I believe had narcissistic personality disorder and a lot of BPD traits. I think that being able to blend the combination of both of those on the podcast is so helpful because, again, this is like the smallest niche, most specific niche in the world. And there's just not a lot of resources for people like us. There's not a lot of conversation because there's so much secrecy and shame involved. And so being able on the podcast to like approach things from both of those perspectives, I think has been really helpful. And it's been so fun for me to do too. It's like one of my favorite, that and the membership are like my favorite things.
And I think,
lots of favorites.
we really align as well. So just kind of, I came back to Twin Falls, Idaho in 2006. And then I also worked in the inpatient hospital, but I was on the education side with adolescents.
Oh, wow.
And then they closed their adolescent side. I was just a teacher at that point. And then I did child welfare, which exposed me to all of these family systems and trauma. I actually have a background in social policy and evaluation.
Know
And
that, Kathy?
I came back to Idaho because I couldn't get a job. So University of Michigan has these little subtracts. And so that's when I went there. It was either that or Jane Addams in Chicago. And so I was like, let me just, go there. And it turned out I actually had a roommate from Idaho in Michigan. It was the glass ceiling experience where, my supervisor said, I don't know who to believe. You were the client, was kind of the deal that broke the camel's back. And it's like, I can't put my license out there for this kind of deal. So I had my master's degree and I decided to go into substance abuse. Then I got laid off. What that did though was help me get on the path to get my clinical. So then I went to a community mental health and opened their substance abuse program. But it's there that I began kind of having this experience with trauma. And so these patients kind of would leave with an open brain, as I put it, where they're activated with symptoms that aren't being addressed by the curriculum. And I just couldn't put a name on how do I actually like resolve. And so then I had asked about EMDR and got some discounted information from the staff of, oh, you don't need it or you're not ready. And I just kept going and I went to a hospital. So then I had my daughter and I was working till 7 at night, like 2 or 3 days a week. And it was just exhausting. And so children kind of changed my life and helped me set boundaries. And then I went to the hospital and they had an EMDR training that came through my community. And that was 2019 and kind of changed everything where I could actually put words to what was kind of happening in the brain, that neuropathology and the psychotraumatology experience where I could say, this is why trauma is affecting the psychology of the patient that's using. And so it gave me that foundation. But in the meantime, I was teaching at Boise State University in their bachelor's program. And I just felt like, I've always been engaged in teaching, but I wanted to then I started my private practice and I thought there's just really a gap in the community. So we kind of have a lot of parallels. I really respect you because what happens is that these community leaders that are out there putting out self-help information or information on these topics sometimes don't have the best information out there that is actually helpful, can repair relationships. We've talked about a Psychology Today article that kind of said, I can't remember. Would you talk about that?
Yeah, it's so interesting because it's such a small niche. Like I'm saying, this gained so much media attention,
Uh-huh.
especially, and it's very much largely focused on this like no contact trend. And
Yeah.
even Psychology Today magazine, which, I think a lot of us in the mental health field have complicated feelings about Psychology Today, but they came out with this article that was very much overwhelmingly shaming. And it was, I believe, in their December 2025 issue, right at the holidays, and just really shaming adults who have been estranged from their parents. And it was far more detailed than that. But in my perspective, it was very much on par with a lot of these false conversations that are happening around these really complicated dynamics. And it's a really interesting thing that a huge talking point here is this idea that adults are like going no contact because it's like
Oh my
trendy.
gosh.
And we aren't talking about like 18-year-olds here. We're talking about like adults in their 30s and 40s who are going no contact, as if they opened up social media one day and saw a post and was like, oh, I'm going to cut off my parents now. It's just,
Though, like that sounds ridiculous, but like
but that's what's
real.
being implied. Yeah,
I
it's
love that you're like the
crazy.
counterpart for that because it's so confusing when you're
Yes.
like, I have this whole dynamic that people are telling me, have compassion. We have a lot of religious patients that are like, but it's forgiveness, forgive. And it's like the abuse that they did over a chronic amount of time is so significant. And then we have this religious component that says forgive. And so I really appreciate your voice to say, no, it's okay to have boundaries, even with, families, that families should be together. And no matter what it does, we can have families and also have boundaries. And so
Like,
I wanted to talk about that. I appreciate you for doing that. I need to ask you how you built the community. I'd like you to kind of go through some of the things that you've offered and shifted and changed over time. When people find this community, it's a place where we can feel like, oh my gosh, people get me. Could you share a little bit about that process for you?
definitely. So
Yeah.
to know me is to know that I am a trained therapist and not a trained business person who has stumbled
Oh my
through
gosh.
to figure
Thank
out their.
Yes.
So that the membership, the Confident Founders membership is definitely a reflection of that. So it first started as like a Patreon group for the You're Not Crazy podcast. So that started in fall, winter of 2024, where I started it with Meetup once a month. And then over the next 6 months, it started growing and gaining more members. I was trying to figure out how can I provide more support and value than just in like once a month meetup. And so that's when I started to really think through what would be helpful to have in here. It evolved to become what it is today, which is where we do an educational workshop once a month on topics related to complicated family dynamics, but also to breaking the cycle and becoming an emotionally healthy adult. So it's really an umbrella for all of those, because I think that
Mhm.
we oftentimes think of navigating toxic family dynamics or breaking the cycle in terms of like, how do we address the dysfunction and abuse within our family? But it bleeds into so much more than that. And it really is like from the DBT, right? Like pulling in, how do we find knowledge and skill building to fill those gaps that we were never shown of what it looks like to handle conflict productively, and to like actually sit with really complicated emotions and to navigate the day-to-day stressors of life without reacting in ways like our parents did. And so That's the educational component. I ended up building an AI tool that I call the Boundaries Helper. That right now we have between 50 and 60 members of the membership. We do a couple of live calls every month where we do kind of like a coaching. I'm transitioning them to be called Boundary Support / Q&A because I think that there's so much value in coming together to hear other people talk about parts of their story that are so similar to yours. It's so validating
So are
because
you
it feels
shifting
so
from that coaching label
very
to,
similar. Just, yes, just a
can
different label.
you talk
Like,
about the rationale there on the coaching and how you thought about that and what that looks like?
totally. Yeah. I was very anti coaching for a very long time before
Hmm.
I delved into the coaching world because I think that there's so many people on it's completely unregulated, right? And there's so many people
Yeah.
online that call themselves coaches and they're really doing therapy, but they don't have training and they're dealing with complicated dynamics and it's not good, bad thing.
Hmm.
And so
Okay.
I was very anti coaching. But like I said, once I realized that there was like this other area of people that I had the capacity to help, but I couldn't because I couldn't meet one to one with everyone or they were out of my licensure area. I was like, okay, how can I clearly define the difference between therapy and coaching, right? Because I don't want to just do more therapy and pretend that it's not therapy that I'm doing. That would not be like ideal. So I think with coaching, I've been really clear on one-to-one. It's very much like consulting. And I think with a group atmosphere, the group coaching, where it gets more complicated and where I've had to evolve and learn over time is that in a membership community, you have people that have been there for a long time. You have new people coming in. We're dealing with really personal, really emotional things in there. And so it's really important to me that there's a very clear distinction that that's not therapy. People need to be working with a therapist
Hmm.
privately to process their trauma. This is a different level of support. And I think that with the group coaching calls, sometimes people don't know what that means, right? Like, how is that different from therapy? And so they come in, and sometimes it gets starting to go into more of trauma processing. And because this is an open membership community where we have people coming and going, and it's not therapy, it's not in anyone's best interest for it to turn into a trauma therapy processing group. And so, the goal of it is to really be educational, validating, to have that sense of community where you're looking and seeing other people that you can chat with in the community chat in between our calls, right? And you can come and you can ask me direct questions like I'm feeling really stuck here or my this is my thought about how I think I should move forward with my family. I'm really conflicted and I can kind of talk through these are questions I think might be helpful to ask yourself. What is motivating you? And I think with these calls, the value is the community connection, but also hearing the way I talk people through these dilemmas because there's nothing that I do that everyone in the community can't do for themselves, right? When this issue comes up, how do I think about it? And that's what I'm trying to model in those calls is like, how can you expand the way you think about these things so that you can feel confident and empowered to navigate these issues?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. So I wanted to ask you about the shifting the label. What does that mean for you and the intent? How does shifting the label, how do you conceptualize that? Either the energy around the community or sort of that rationale. And then I know this is a topic. You just said something about the guru. These are things people can do for themselves. So we want to get into that topic a little bit of these self-help gurus. Maybe they go together, but those are the two things I'd like to ask.
Definitely. So, my intent with shifting the label here, whether it plays out or not, we will see. My intent with it is to make it very clear. This is a newer like form of support that has really come about in the last several years with like COVID is are these like online communities, right? Connect with other people. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that my biggest thing is that I never ever want anyone to feel misled or like they're entering a situation, a service that I'm providing without the information that they need to make an informed decision. This is the therapist in me, right? It is, how do I clearly communicate what someone can expect from this call? And I think by relabeling it as boundary support slash Q&A, it makes it a bit clearer that this is a great place where you can come to get feedback from me on where you're feeling stuck. At least that's the intent behind it, rather than drifting into a trauma processing group, which I think
Uh-huh.
sometimes the group coaching like label gets a little confusing and maybe
Uh-huh.
isn't as clear.
And I want to ask you, so when you get into this idea, and I think this is very important when we're looking at these ideas of gurus and these people that say, I have the solution to your problems. I want to ask you about that and how you kind of approach that, because I think we have so many people that say, I have the answer to your problems. And that appears to prey on people to get this mass following. And so for me, as a cult and religious interest of mine, let's just say, I really appreciate and value that. And we do want people to think critically about that. So I'm just curious on your thoughts on that.
Definitely. I mean, it's such a good question. When I'm very passionate about the fallacy and myth behind the no contact trend, a lot of people online automatically assume, because I am anti the no contact trend, that I take a very strong stance around telling people what they should do with their family. They make this automatic assumption that I'm telling people that they should go no contact or that they should never go no contact or whatever it is. And my stance is the furthest from that. My stance is very much, when we grow up in a dysfunctional family, we are not allowed to have our own thoughts, feelings, and opinions. We have to constantly be hyper vigilant to check in with our emotionally volatile parent, our punishing parent. We have to, read the room. We have to anticipate crisis. We have to try to prevent it. That is how we learn to stay safe. And what we think and feel is irrelevant. What our parent thinks and feels and wants from us is what is relevant and what keeps us safe to know. And so we develop this huge disconnect between who we are and who we've been told that we should be. And it would be insane for me to tell anyone that in order to heal, you should listen to me. And I know exactly what is right for you in your exact situation. That's just perpetuating the trauma. And that's what so many of these gurus are doing. They're saying, I have all the answers, right? This is what's right. This is what's wrong. It's so black and white. It's so toxic. And it's such bullshit, because the reality is, you can have a boundaried relationship with your parent, and that's not necessarily a good or a bad thing. The good or the bad thing is, are you making that decision because you feel trapped in a box, like you have no other choice? Or are you making that decision because you have a lot of acceptance around the reality of
Yeah.
this is the best out of several kind of shitty choices?
And they talk, I think it's presented as a flippant decision, and it's
Totally.
not flippant. And what you said there are all of the reasons and rationales and their lived experience that are behind that decision, that the judgment just comes with, this is the, good thing. We see all the things on TikTok. So all those people who go no contact, we see this in some of the religious doctrines that say keep families together forever, no matter what. And how traumatizing, if you've had significant damage there. And so, I do appreciate, even if you have had significant damage, I'm not going to tell you how to process that material. And I think that is so important. I wanted to talk a little bit about when you're working with personality disordered people. I did work in a DBT fidelity program, and DBT groups and the curriculums dealing with personality disordered people in those contexts. I did an outpatient, and then we had at the hospital, we did the fidelity with an adjunct hospital piece. And when you're working with these disordered populations, it's a lot of interpersonal dysregulation. And confusion around choices. So I want to shift that into your community where you've had to shift some boundaries with these instincts from these family members that have. Could you share a little bit about that experience where you've had to restructure and rethink about that as you've gone through this?
Yeah. The interesting thing is, I'm a cycle breaker too, right? And so a lot of what I talk about and try to model is that there's not a finish line. Like, I'm still on my journey, right? And there are things that I still work towards and work on. Boundaries professionally is one of them, right? I grew up with super inappropriate expectations and roles and everything. And
Mhm.
I think that sometimes building something that is so foreign, which this membership
Mhm.
community was never in a million years when I became a therapist, something that I thought would be in my future, right? It's so foreign. It is hard to conceptualize sometimes with that where boundaries would even need to be and what they need to look like.
Right.
And then you get in there and, it's complicated because I have like personal, professional boundaries that I need to set. And then there's also, taking into consideration like the health of the community overall too, and like what boundaries look like for that, and to protect the community that we're building in this really special place from. And so I think it's layered. It's an evolving process. And I try, to reflect on it and to really just look at big picture that are really great about providing feedback to me about what is really helping and where some things are feeling like they're getting lost in translation or feeling a little overwhelming or unclear. And so that's been really helpful too, in like creating really clear boundaries there, or clearer as we go along.
And I think, this
Mm.
takes just recognizing the amount of personal and psychological work that this requires to set those boundaries and make those decisions. I just really want to validate that and recognize you for that because can be exhausting to navigate all of these things. I've done the same thing with my EMDR university community. How do I meet the need? But also my community was, there were people out there that were saying you can't achieve this goal on the career path. And I am a cycle breaker. Like, yes, you can. It can be easy. Here, let me show you how to do this. It doesn't have to be that complicated. And creating that community in that sense of let me connect you to this person and that person so we can have a good lived experience. I want to ask you a little bit about kind of this. You've had some practice wisdom, you had some experience as you go, and you can impart that knowledge. But I want to ask you, I know that you have integrated TikTok into your experience, and that has been a whole volume of content, let's just say, that you're learning how to navigate. What would you say if you're building a community about the value of putting yourself out there on social media and kind of where do you stand on that now? Is that something you would have done in hindsight, or how are you reflecting in your presence there?
I think the completely transparent, honest answer is that if I was independently wealthy or had a trust fund, the answer would be no. I would not be on social media at
Uh
all.
huh.
It's
Yes.
messy and it is
Mhm.
everything. And if that were the case, I would probably just allow the membership to slowly exist, and like it could ebb and flow in my private practice too. I would have my website, I would have, the podcast, but I would just like hide in the shadows a little bit. I wouldn't be out there because it's uncomfortable. And I think it, for the thing that's really helped me is that I have been such a private person my entire life, which is probably shocking because I'm very much public now. But when I started the podcast, I had been doing almost 2 decades of my own healing work and therapy. I have
Mhm.
done so
Mhm.
much work, and
Mhm.
I am really clear about the aspects of my own story that I have done enough work around to talk about and to put out there, and the aspects that are private for me, my personal therapist, for my spouse, my very close, intimate friends, right? And I think that it is that is an interesting thing because when you become a public figure, even on a small scale, like I am theoretically like a micro influencer, I guess they say, but when you become a more public figure, you put yourself out there and people are going to say whatever they want to say about you. And some of the stuff is really mean. Some of the stuff is horrible. Like I've done this series on TikTok called My Narcissist Mom, where I talk about my journey growing up with the narcissist mom. And I talk about how I was always made to have bangs growing up because my mom said my forehead was too big. And so I had to have bangs to cover it up.
Why, I'm sorry.
It's wild ride, this type of family. It's a wild ride. But that was just a small snippet of one of my stories. And the estranged parents, influencers of TikTok, that's like a whole TikTok community. That was like the thing. And
the bullying.
And, it's something that doesn't bother me. If it bothered me now, I wouldn't have talked about it. But when you get people intentionally trying to twist your words and imply that you're saying something that you're not saying, make fun of your physical appearance, it's a lot. There have been moments where like I haven't read any of my comments for like weeks on end because I'm like, I just can't go through that emotional roller coaster. So I think that social media is so beneficial in so many ways. It helps, especially therapists, put out actual educational, psychoeducational information.
Yes.
And that is so valuable. And it helps us, in this day and age, grow our careers and our ability to like do the work that we're passionate about. And it comes at a cost, just like it does for everyone. There's a lot of toxicity there. If I didn't need to make money, then probably would not have done it. But I think the realistic thing is most of us have to make money to support ourselves and our families. And I think it's a really unique avenue that you can go down to like really get your brand out there and to help provide education and value too on a bigger scale.
Well, I want to see a vision. Where do you see your community going? If we're going to do the magic wand question here.
Yes.
So if you had a magic wand, your 5 to 10 year plan, or what you kind of envision with this pathway that you've so nurtured so respectfully, where do you see that going? It could be the membership. It could be the magic wand question. So whatever you envision on this pathway.
So I'm so sorry. My thing just crashed.
We can splice this and re-edit, and now with the script, we can do what we want.
It wasn't too bad. Please repeat your question.
Envision. Where do you see this going? The magic wand question.
Yes. So like I was saying, I feel so fortunate that I've chosen a profession that I really see myself doing until I'm like old and gray. Love doing therapy. And I imagine as, the next 5 to 10 years progress, probably the size of my therapy practice will ebb and flow as some of these other aspects of my career grow themselves, but I intend to continue to do therapy. I would really love to see the membership grow to a small membership. I have no desire for it to grow to like the 20,000, 100,000, like Good Inside Dr. Becky's program. Although I admire Dr. Becky so much, I value the intimate nature of our community. And so I think that growing it to a couple of hundred people is really the like sweet spot that I'm hoping for, because not everyone comes to every live coaching call. Some people are there, more hesitantly, like kind of reading in the background and learning in the background. But I want to keep it small enough that when we do live events and when we have the chat and stuff, it's not feeling overwhelming and there's not so many people in there where it feels like you're just on a Reddit thread, right?
Yeah.
Of it.
We're not Reddit threaders.
No. And I would love to see the podcast grow. That's something that I love doing so much. I'd love to continue doing that and take advantage of what opportunities present themselves in the next couple of years. I would love to write a book. I think that would be very cool.
Oh my gosh.
So we will see. But my ultimate goal is to just help people that are dealing with complicated and toxic family dynamics recognize that they're not alone. There are people out there who get it, who are also doing the work, and to instill some level of hope that it is such a dark thing to be a cycle breaker and to not feel like you have the support that you need, the clarity that you need to address your situation, and to instill some hope that things can not only get better, but you can gain autonomy over your own life. And you don't have to be defined by all of these things that have been put upon you. So that's my goal.
Yeah. And I can say, as a recipient of your product, that is exactly what I'm able to do. It really just helped me personally do some of those tasks that were so confusing. So Torie Wiksell, she's amazing. Make sure you go on her podcast and give it a 5-star rating. Same as mine. Yeah. We love her. We love her content. We have toxic parent content, gaslighting content, all of that nuanced content there. We are so happy to have her. We will see you all next time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us at another episode of Kathy on the Couch, the EMDR podcast for everyday clinicians. We hope today's conversation has inspired you, sparked new ideas, and offered practical tools you can bring into your own practice. Whether you're just starting out in the mental health field, a seasoned clinician, or someone just curious about the transformative power of EMDR, EMDR University is here to companion you alongside your EMDR career path. From Rewired 360, the moment you complete your basic training, we offer comprehensive support and resources that guide you through every stage, from newly trained EMDR clinicians to EMDR certification, consultants in training, and even trainers. Our curriculum is designed to fill the gaps often found in the marketplace, providing advanced training and consultation and mentorship to you as you progress in your professional journey. Whether you're seeking foundational skills or advanced expertise, EMDR University is your partner in growth and excellence. So be sure to check out our show notes for a full list of courses, and don't forget to visit our swag store at rewired360.shop. Also, check out our show notes if you're interested in learning more about EMDR intensives or want to look at innovative tools like Dharma Doctor Tappers, and you'll find the links in our show notes. A quick disclaimer, the information shared on this podcast reflects the perspectives and experiences of our guests and hosts. It's not intended to substitute for professional consultation, supervision, or individual guidance. If you have questions about how to apply any of the concepts discussed, we encourage you to consult with your clinical supervisor, consultant, or your local supervision board. As always, follow research-based protocols and best practices in your work. We're here to walk alongside you as you deepen your understanding of EMDR. This is Kathy Couch. On behalf of Torie, Parmenter, and the entire team, thank you for being here with us on the couch, and we'll see you in the next episode.